Well, good morning, everybody. I'm trying to dial a little bit of neck in, but while that's happening, I can kind of kick us off a little bit. Thanks, everybody, for coming out on such a gnarly morning. Get a couple more coming in here. So my name's Scott Vlon. For those of you I don't know, which are a few, and it's heartening to see. I'm the director of CD, founding director. We've been out here on the Main Street, Norway, talking about climate change and climate action and climate justice for the last 12 and a half years. And this project is one of our, by far the biggest project that we've ever launched. We work over areas of food, shelter, energy, transport. We have an energy working group that's been talking about this since forever, but in earnest. Mike Dunn is with us today. He's on our board, and about 8 years ago came into the office here one day and said, hey, look, there's this prize, this federal prize called Sunshot, solar in your community or something. And look, we could win some money to do a solar project. And so we started putting our heads together about what that would look like. Simultaneously, we had one of the first things that ever happened here was Jonah Fertig from the Cooperative Development Institute came and sat here and talked to us about cooperatives and how cooperatives work, and consumer cooperative, worker cooperative. At the time, when we were working on this original proposal, Catherine Bessie was on our board, and Catherine and Mike and Don McLean and Pam Edwards, we met in this room like every other week for like years, it seemed like. We applied for that grant, that prize. We actually were awarded $20,000 in technical assistance. We hired Will Kessler, who was working at Revision Energy, had his own solar consulting business. He created this pro forma for us. We were trying to figure out how this would work. At the time, Maine solar policy, we could only have 9 off-takers on a project. We hired some other consultants with our $20,000 of TA that we won, and basically figured out this will never work with this policy. So at the time, we got involved with other organizations in the state that were pushing for more progressive solar policy in Maine. 2019, we won that fight, and we got the floodgates opened up to solar development in Maine. Before we could even get our feet on the ground, every out-of-state developer had come into Maine and started locking up the queue with these large, megawatt, 5 megawatt, 2 megawatt projects. We continued to work on our project. Vaughn Woodruff from InSource Renewables showed up here one day, and he's like, we want to get all the co-ops in Maine, all the food co-ops on solar power. And we also want to be around where tech schools are, so we can start to build a workforce for this industry. And he brought this guy with him, Tyler, who was working for UGE, and we got together with the town of Norway, and we've been talking with the tech school forever over there about, and we ended up doing a project with UGE, who Tyler was working for at the time, over at the landfill, megawatt project that was for businesses and the municipality. So we have our municipality on solar. We got 18 area businesses on solar, and one of our schools as well. And meanwhile, we're still kicking this project around and trying to figure out how we were going to make this work. But we're at this point, we're committed to the cooperative piece. Meanwhile, Katie goes to work for CDI, leaves our board because of conflict of interest, and CD's been doing cooperative development training with CDI all this time. So of course, when we decided to do this community solar project, we knew it would be a cooperative. And Catherine's been on the team working from CDI and has given this project an immense amount of support. So without Mike having the original idea and without Catherine giving us all the support, we wouldn't be here today. So Tyler was giving us a bunch of free TA as well. And I remember we were sitting on the couch over here one day, working on the UGE project, but he just started like brainstorming on this. And we came up with this idea of doing these smaller projects on single phase power lines, which none of the big operators were doing. And this would allow us interconnection and thousands of nodes around CMP territory that no one else was really looking at. Then we had a Fred Garbo and Sean Kane, a founder here, Fred Garbo on our advisory board, who are installing all our trackers all over the community as well. And we were like, well, what if we use those trackers? Because we started looking at how we would set these solar projects up on these level 2 interconnections, and we would have to overbuild the project and then clip the power all, during peak production, so that we would never exceed a certain amount of output. Then we started looking at the trackers, which would do peak output, for a large part of the day and be a more consistent output and would produce power during these peak demand times. So we like, wow, let's pivot and we'll do multiple small projects. We'll kind of create our own niche. And we wrote a federal prize, again, this Energizing Rural Communities Prize, and we won $100,000, which gave us money to, hire action. And then Tyler walked in one day and said, you know what, I want to quit my job and run this project. And we're like, oh my God, we have a solar developer with, a decade or more of experience. It's going to take this thing on, because that's what we really lack. We didn't really know. None of us, we had the general idea, but we didn't know how to do this nuts and bolts thing. Tyler joined the team. We had a board, a working group. We've been promoting this project for a few years now since we got that first prize. So then with Tyler on the team, we got bold and we applied for there was another prize that was a $5 to $50 million prize, which we were rejected from, but they scaled it down to a smaller $500,000 to $5 million prize. We're like, we're going to go for that. So we threw our hat in the ring. This is before Tyler actually came on board, and we got through the first round of 650 applicants. There were 60 selected for the second round, and we were selected for that. And then Tyler joined. We sat at that table for a couple of days, and we just flushed out our proposal, and we won this big award. That's how we ended up where we are here today. So that's our story in a nutshell. I've been acting as the board president, and most of the other, our steering committee became a board. We incorporated, and here we are. And you guys, this is the first member meeting. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tyler, who's going to take us through exactly how this all works.
All right, good morning, everybody. To our friends online, can you hear okay?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
All right, super. And just a heads up that we're recording this meeting for our own records and posterity, so that 100 years from now we can all AI infinity caves and watch the original meeting. But no, this is an exciting day. I love hearing the story every time it gets the chance to be told, and it's pretty remarkable, both like how long it's taken to get to this point, and also how much has been accomplished in a very short period of time. The concept, of course, has been percolating for a long time, subject to policy and financing and a lot of other practical concerns. But as I was looking through some of the materials that I had prepared for the steering committee around a little bit more than a year ago, kind of fleshing out our plan for 2024, it's really something to see how much has happened in just a short period of time. So over the last 12 to 15 months, this idea of Maine Community Power has gone from a whiteboarding session. This was one that I did just in my office at home. But if you look around here, there are elements of this kind of all around. There's a whiteboard over on this side under the energy category of CV's work from the very early days of this concept. There's there was a model for cooperative community solar and a laminated sheet over here. So this idea that we can invert the energy system and build infrastructure that kind of serves the people who are using the energy is an idea whose time has come, but also one that has been percolating for a long time. And so today is a particularly special day because it's my anniversary. of 1 year, but it's also the anniversary of going from concept to reality here. So this is equipment being delivered to our first project over at Mike Dunn's property in Harrison that just got delivered yesterday and is now ready for us to start digging holes and put stuff together. So the timing of our first annual meeting couldn't be better. This is really when this concept becomes real. So thanks for putting in your time and money and showing up today to kick us all off together. The idea of cooperative community solar is actually not that complicated, right? It's just that people should come together and be able to own and benefit from the infrastructure that we're building. But when you kind of dig into things, it's obviously very complicated. And cooperative element, the small project element, and the straightforward element are three things that we've settled on as kind of core competitive differentiators and ultimately core advantages that I think will set our organization up for success over the long term. The cooperative ownership piece means that this isn't just about raising a bunch of money from a wealthy investor and then building a business around maximizing those returns. It means that we have to go and find alternate sources of capital to fund the work that we're doing. It means that there are no big payouts to investors, but small, consistent, growing payouts to our members over time, and that the decisions that we make as an organization are reflective of our owners, who are also our customers. And so it allows us to have a very different perspective on what we do and how we do it so that we can serve those members best. The straightforward customer experience is actually probably one of the most complicated pieces of this. Anybody who's familiar with how community solar out in Maine to date is probably not, you don't get warm and fuzzies. It's extremely complicated. And the reason that it's so complicated is mostly because it's such a fractured environment. There are companies that develop projects, other companies own them, other companies go send people around to sign people up, other companies manage the billing and collections, and it's really kind of a Frankenstein model that is not really organized around a clear customer benefit and an easy to understand customer experience. And so we took this cooperative ownership model and said, well, if we exist to serve the interests of our membership, then we should build a customer experience that serves that interest as well. And that doesn't mean turning people into energy nerds. It doesn't mean making people really understand energy policy. Having people really get PhDs in how their CMP bill works. It means doing all that dirty work on the back end and presenting it to our membership in a way that allows them to every month just look at their bill and say, ah, yes, this makes sense. I saved some money and now I can go back to my life. We're here as a professional organization to make that simple for people so that they can see that they're getting a benefit from Maine Community Power. And that's it. We're not asking more than that. And then the last piece is the small projects. And Scott mentioned that developers don't do small projects for many reasons. They're more complicated in the sense that there are just as many moving pieces for less gain. There are more transaction costs. The cost to build the projects are higher. And there are a lot of easier ways to make money in the energy world than to do these small projects. But when we're asking a different question, we're solving a different equation. And so when we ask ourselves, like, what do the members want? What do they like about what's out there now? What don't they like? What trends are emerging in our broader communities? It becomes obvious that smaller projects that blend into the landscape, that you can build quickly, that can serve multiple uses, and that can be a lot more effective as beyond just the kilowatt hour energy production from these systems. make a grid resilient. They provide lower costs to all ratepayers, regardless of whether they're a member of the co-op or not. There is a value stack that comes together with these small projects that larger projects just don't have. And so when we ask, again, what type of projects do our members want, we end up with a very different question, a very different answer than if we were under an investor-owned model. To make all this happen, we need people. We are a cooperative. We're nothing more than a collection of the people who are sitting around the table in various roles. And over the last year, this organization has morphed from the volunteer and consultant-led organization to a governance-based organization with elected representatives, elected directors, professional staff up and down the food chain. And so we're a sizable team, I would say. Right now, we've got a handful of people, and we'll continue to grow over the coming months. One of the things that has become clear, and since the whiteboarding session, was that each of the elements of building out this business are way more complicated than appear at first glance, and take more time and require more resources. And so, in the last months, we've really tried to recalibrate and understand what are the roles that we need to fill to make this project a success, and who are the right people to do that. As we've opened up to job postings for applicants, it's been shocking the volume and the quality of applicants that we've gotten for these positions, and that, I think, is a testament to the work that we're doing. This is an initiative that people want to be a part of, and everybody who's on the team is on the team not just because of their qualifications and their background, but because they have proactively said that, like, this is something I want to be a part of. And so whether it's the specific role that they applied for or a different role that we slot them into, we've got a team of A-listers that bring a really unique skill set to the table here, and don't just believe in the work that they're doing, but the reason we're doing it in the first place. So we've got Brian Tainter is our operations manager. He does everything. His background is in community organizing, nonprofit management, and also some time at Microsoft. And so we've got a lot of technical questions and software requirements and so on. So Brian's our guy to keep us organized and build out the systems that we need to pull this all off. We've got Matt Kennedy, who leads our project development team. It is a full-time job to get out there and identify sites, contact landowners, do the site visits, move projects through interconnection process and permitting, et cetera. So Matt is not only doing that, his background is in project development for bigger projects. He's also a wetland scientist. And so we've got a real core skill set here to know what a good site is and what a bad site is. Focus on the opportunities that are in front of us to move the ball forward as quickly and efficiently as we can. Izzy Willette is joining our team next week, a week and a half. She comes from a revision where she's doing project management or project coordination for new commercial projects over there. So same thing, this experience developing projects at scale so that we can build this replicable process that allows us to identify, secure, develop, and build lots of projects very quickly. We also have joining us remotely, Rachel Chase, who is a local to the area, and she is leading our communications efforts. So she sends out the newsletters. She probably called you if you hadn't RSVP'd yet, to check in and make sure that you could join today. And is also leading our outreach campaign. We've got about 15,000 mailers in the corner over there. So people across the Oxford Hills School District are going to start to hear from us very soon. And hopefully you'll all be good ambassadors to clarify any of the questions that they have and keep the momentum going. We have Hossein Sabzian Papi. He is joining remotely as well. He is a PhD GIS specialist. So as we're doing mapping exercises to identify good sites, figure out where on the grid we're most likely to have success by plugging these projects in and then prioritize which landowners to reach out to. He's our guy. He's been doing this type of stuff for the broader agricultural landscape in a previous life, and now we're taking his brain power and putting it to work for Maine Community Power. In early June, we'll be joined by Eli Mears, who is an undergraduate student. He's currently at Bowdoin and is a Denning, I think it's called Denning, the Denning Fellow. Will be joining us full time for the summer, and we're just going to throw him into the mix and work him to the bone. So he's excited to join us as well. And then we have an opening right now that we'll be choosing candidate for in the coming weeks to basically be the member-facing person in the organization, a community engagement manager, to help members navigate the onboarding process, bring them into the fold, go to events, all that kind of stuff. All right, so for 2025, we have 6 goals, and these goals are in 3 kind of categories, and we have kind of 2 tiers. Starting at the top, we're really in the business of this year is just executing the grant, right? We won this large grant from the Department of Energy. This has funded our startup costs and the capital expenses for the first 6 projects. So we just have to do that. We have to, at the end of the day, the foundational piece here is, are we saving money for our 300 members? Yes or no? Do we have 300 members enrolled in the cooperative to provide savings to? And at least half of those members need to be in the income eligible bucket. So you can meet that criteria in a couple different ways. In general, it's if you qualify for certain assistance programs or if you are under area median income. So a good example that a lot of solar companies talk about low-income household access or dual use components. They're very big buzzwords in the industry, but it's actually baked into our DNA. It's in our bylaws. It's in our specific goals. And so this is not something that is an afterthought, but the inclusiveness is part of the core. And then the last question here is, do we have 6 projects operational? So we'll definitely have 2 projects operational. The other 4 are under development now, and so we'll move those along, and hopefully we can get those built and operational by the end of the year. So that's tier 1. Tier 2 is, does this business exist beyond the grant? And the answer is yes. The day after we submitted the grant application to Department of Energy, this was, I think, October 17th, 2023, we said, okay, now throw that away. Forget that we ever applied for this grant. This business needs to exist on its own, regardless of whether we get grants or not. Grants are nice, they're helpful. They avoid the need to take on debt or bring in investors, but the business needs to work by itself. And so we figured out a way to make that happen. And so when the grant award was announced, that's great, but that just means phase 1 doesn't require complex financing. But what happens after these first 6 projects is really where the exciting part begins. So for project 7 onward, we need to close on financing for a non-grant funded project. Now, this is not hypothetical. That financing is out there. I personally secured it for projects in the past, and there is a lot of resources out there right now that are looking to finance exactly these types of projects. So this is not a question of will the terms be acceptable? Is the money available? It's just a question of having the projects that are ready to be financed. Moving forward, we need a lot more members. We want to have another 300 members join the organization by the end of the year. So we'll consider that a success if we have 600 members enrolled by the end of the year. And then we want to have a dozen or so more projects that are under development that we can get going later in the year into next year. The model that we are pursuing is one that has a lot of moving parts. And over the last year, when this started in 2020, end of 2023, when we were modeling out our pro forma for the purpose of the grant application, the business model looks really good in an Excel spreadsheet, right? Because you can make the assumptions say anything you want them to say. And so over the last year, what we've really had to do is test those assumptions. You know, what do we think is going to happen with our build costs? What do we think is going to happen with the price of electricity? What type of legal expenses will we have? You know, all these million different things that will impact our costs. And we have tested out most of them. There are still assumptions in our model, but they're not deal breaker assumptions. And so we know now that if we can implement the work plan that we've sketched out, that the business will be successful. And so I put together a couple slides to kind of walk through what this looks like kind of on the financial side, not to get into great details on the specific numbers, but just to lay out in broad strokes what this would be. So in phase one, we have this funding from the Department of Energy, and we've won two other grants. One is through the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, and then one just last week, actually, we got a grant from MTI, Maine Technological Institute. So they love our basically the software side of what we're doing. And so that grant funding is great because, again, it means that we can focus on building our platform without needing to take on debt or other investors. When we build these 6 projects, also generate tax credits. That's a big piece of solar financing. And so normally the tax credits go toward offsetting your capital costs. But in this case, the capital costs are paid for by the grant. So the tax credits are just gravy on top. So as a result of these 6 projects, we'll generate another $2 or so million that just goes back into our general coffers that we can use to carry on. And so that will provide additional runway to for the second half of the year and into next year. And then thirdly, we have financing set up already. So we have a $500,000 line of credit set up with the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. And that basically gives us a nice cushion so that if there are delays in selling the tax credits, or if there are delays in further grant disbursements, what have you, we're not worried about paying payroll or moving forward because we have this backup financing in place. In phase 2, so consider phase 2, project 7 onward, after the grant. What we do is we spend a little bit of money to develop a project, right? It's around $10,000. It goes to things like some engineering, interconnection fees, permitting fees, maybe some surveying, the basic things you need to do to get a project under contract and ready to build. That's money that we spend out of our own coffers. And then when we get ready for construction, we use financing from then on out. And so you use a construction line of credit to basically pay for the equipment, to pay for the installation, and to get the project operational. Once the project is operational, then we generate these tax credits. And for our projects, it is about half the project is paid for with tax credits. The base tax credit for solar is 30%. But because our projects are serving majority low-income households, we're eligible for a bonus credit of another 20%. And so our base assumption is that we'll have 50% of the eligible costs will come from tax credits. Now that can actually go up even further. If we use domestically produced equipment, we can get another 10%. If we build on a polluted site, we can get another 10%. So you can actually get a maximum of 70% of your capital costs covered by tax credits. So as we look ahead, we're seeking to optimize that equation. So how do we get the most bang for our buck here? And then the remainder of the capital requirement is in the form of a project debt. So that could be from banks, it could be from other lenders. The most common form of financing for projects is actually a single lender who finances both the construction phase and the long-term phase. So it just flips once the project reaches operation, and you basically have a 20-year loan on the project, which matches up nicely with the 20-year net energy billing program in Maine. So we'll work from left to right here, but the specific numbers are not really important. I just wanted to show you that over the course of a project, how these pieces come together. So our total project costs are let's call it $750,000 to bring a project to life. And that is mostly equipment costs, right? These trackers and solar panels and inverters are quite expensive. The balance of it comes from for the labor to build the projects. And then when we get into financing the construction phase, you have to pay interest on that money. So our total project cost is around $750,000. But
That's for 1 megawatt?
200 kilowatts.
200.
Yeah. One of these 20 tracker projects.
Okay.
Yeah. So it costs us about $750,000, but the fair market value of these projects is actually more than that. And you can think of this as if we were to just not build the projects ourselves, but call another company to build a project for us, they would have that same $750,000 cost, but then they would add a margin on top of that, right? They got to make money too. So in our business model, we can actually charge ourselves a margin, and therefore we're creating an extra, in this case, about $100,000 per project that comes back to the co-op. Now, that's really important because we need to generate profits to fund our operations. And eventually we'll get to a point where there are enough projects operational that's what covers our overhead costs, but that's not where we are yet. There's an intermediate phase. So if our general project cost is about $750,000, we add another $100,000 in the form of a developer fee. That gets us to $850,000 of eligible costs. So half of that is coming from the tax credits that are generated, and the other half is coming from a project loan. Now, there's a lot of moving pieces here, but the simple point here that is important is that with every dollar we spend, we generate 50 cents in tax credits. And what that means is that this business model it's a very cost-effective way to raise money, because for every dollar we spend, we actually only spend 50 cents. So especially if we can get project loans at below market interest rates, which we can, that gives us a huge advantage in the marketplace, because that means our cost of capital is lower than our competitors. So we can do some things that they can't do, like provide more savings to our members. So the developer fees are a really important piece of this puzzle, because when we go forward, we want to get on pace to develop and build 1 to 2 projects per month, preferably 2 projects, because a installation crew, once they're trained up and they're really going, they can build a project start to finish in 2 weeks. So we want to keep that installation crew going all year round. So we need to develop a big project pipeline so that we can schedule that work out. We can do the subterranean work with the foundations and the wires during the construction season. And then we can do the above ground work with the panel installation and tracker installation and the remainder of the electrical. You can do that all year round. So if we can do a good job of building up a pipeline of projects, then we can keep our construction crew going all year round. That will provide significant efficiencies, but it allows us to forecast what we're going to get in terms of developer fees and keep this train going. So if we can get in the habit of building 1 to 2 projects per month, that more than covers our operational cash requirements. At a certain point, we'll have so many projects operational that actually the remaining cash from the operations of the projects is sufficient to cover our overhead. And then we're not reliant entirely on developing new projects. Now, I showed similar numbers to a bank, and they said you're going to get from 0 projects to 100 projects in 5 years. And I said, yeah, actually, that's I think a very conservative estimation. But even that because my original projections were much, much higher than that. Our ceiling is more a function of what the grid can take and how much pushback we get from the utility and so on, which we'll find out over time. But there's not a doubt in my mind that we can put many hundreds of projects on the existing grid. So when we have around 100 projects that are operational, that will provide sufficient kind of annual leftover that we can cover from that. And so that's when we really reach what's called escape velocity. Right? We don't need new financing. We don't need new projects. We can just maintain what we have and operate from there. But that provides us some breathing room to focus on what comes next for the organization. So that's all I wanted to share about the financing side of things. We actually have a couple minutes if there are any particular questions that jump up. Yeah.
How confident are you in the tax credits going forward, being available forward?
In general, there's a lot of policy risk right now. And so we have our two main policy risks are the tax credits and the net energy billing program in Maine. And so I'll kind of address that proactively, which is that there will definitely be some changes to net energy billing in Maine this year. There are proposals out there to totally destroy the program, and that probably won't go anywhere. And there are proposals out there to kind of dramatically change the program in ways that would not be helpful to the broader market, but that our message has seemed to reach Augusta. And so even in a lot of these really draconian proposals, there are specific carve-outs for cooperative community solar. And so we've received a lot of positive feedback from kind of the range of political persuasions from legislators. So I think in Maine, we're going to be pretty good. In Washington, it's a wild card, but the kind of conventional wisdom right now is that there is enough support for the tax credit in Republican districts, because that's where the vast majority of the investment has taken place so far, that they won't have the support to dramatically change the program. I think at the end of the day, though, if they did sunset I think that our exercise here of developing these small projects, this is not a 20-year exercise. This is like a 5-year exercise, right? That the future is going to look very different than it does right now. And this model we don't have forever to do this, which is why we need to move quickly to take advantage of the opportunity at hand. And we'll pivot over time and so on. But we don't need this world to last forever. We just need it to last long enough for us to get our feet underneath. Yeah.
Your current model it seems to be assuming that you won't be applying for more grants moving forward. Is that true, or do you plan to maybe consider applying for more?
Yeah, there are, it's interesting. Prior to the election, the tone out there was very different, right? We were entering this era of like unfathomable amounts of money coming down the pike for clean energy and for particularly equitable models and so on. And those spigots have either turned off or closed off entirely, which is unfortunate. Don't get me wrong, but it has meant that we're in some ways kind of some of the last ones standing. And so there are organizations out there that are not affected by, like MPI is a really good example, or the existing federal programs that are kind of not subject to the funding that is under attack right now. And so there are a lot of opportunities for support for our business model. We will continue to pursue grant opportunities to kind of facilitate interesting ideas or new channels, but we're not dependent on those moving forward. Yeah.
CMP seems to be gatekeeper about how many electrons you can have or how many you can add and so forth. The 100, just picking 100 models, does it in some way compete with residential level advocacy for individual installations of on garages or buildings, or because you knock on the door and say, I'd like to have this much in this corner of rural Maine, And then rural Maine gets excited and says, I'd like to do it on my location, and I'd like to do it on, my neighbor wants to do it. Is it a competition or a collaboration? How does that all fit together?
Our business model is a collaborative model, right? At the end of the day, we're just a collection of individual energy users who are building a company to reduce our expenses. These projects are so small that they are basically immaterial to the performance of the grid or the on an individual basis, or the ability of anybody else to connect their own system. In many ways, it's actually the opposite, in the sense that the more projects we put out there, the more efficiencies we gain, the more insight we gain into how the grid is performing, and then we can provide solutions that improve the performance of the grid that would not have otherwise taken place. I'll give an example here. There are like 400 and something circuits in CMP territory. And so one of the questions we're asking is, well, how many projects like this can we actually build on the CMP grid? We don't know the answer to that question. So we're going to have to just find as many sites as we can along this specific circuit and do one project, then another project, then another project until CMP says you can't do this anymore. And that is a question of whether a project requires any grid upgrades in order to connect safely or not, because we're doing this expedited process that they basically look and say, can we plug this in with no problems, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, we're good. If it's no, it's a deal breaker and we go somewhere else. So on the circuit in Harrison, which also bolsters Mills Road, that also goes into Otis Field, it eventually goes to Swampville Road, and it ends at the municipal town forest, where we're looking at building a site there. Literally a line extension off the end of the circuit, 6+ miles off the end of the circuit. So we've got a lot of potential sites along this circuit. We applied for project 1 at the Dunn property, approved, no problem. Project number 2, approved, no problem. Project number 3 was the Swampville site at the end of the circuit, approved, no problem. Project number 4 is going to be another site right next to it at that same property, failed. Why did it fail? Because it caused a voltage problem on the grid. But what the real problem was is that there's a segment of the circuit on Bolsters Mills Road about a mile away that is it's just really old, small wire, and it needs to be upgraded. And so they said, in order for this project to be approved, you got to upgrade that wire, which will cost $180,000, which is a deal breaker. Now, the actual problem that this project is causing is like a very minor voltage violation. It's not a technical conversation, it doesn't matter. The point is that it's like so small, the problems they cause are immaterial, but they are enough to trigger something on this utility side that allows them to say no. Or if you want it to be yes, then you need to replace this wire, which in all honesty, they probably need to replace anyway, but they're just using the opportunity to get us to pay for their upgrade work. So now we go back to the drawing board and we say, okay, well, if we move this project somewhere else, will it have the same voltage violation? If we add a small battery, will that mitigate the concern? And so we want to build more and more projects. And if we need to tweak the locations or the technical configurations in order to do that, that's what we're going to do. And so we might be able to put, say, 500 or 1,000 of these projects on the existing grid with no batteries, for example. But if we add batteries, well, then it's a whole new ball game. And so at that point, now we've got a big portfolio of solar projects plus batteries helping the grid really. And so these conversations evolve over time. So right now, CMP is just saying, no, you can't build that project there. It's going to cause a problem. But as these conversations evolve, they become more collaborative because we're actually providing big benefits to their existing grid that they didn't necessarily know what to do about in the first place. That's a very long answer to your very straightforward question.
Very helpful.
It's a relevant one.
Yeah. I mean, the flip side of this is like, we're focused on CMP territory because it's big and it's where we are and we got to test out a lot of what we're doing. CMP is also a lot easier to work with than Versant. But once we have in part because they have management issues, but also their grid is really a lot more fragile than CMP's grid. So we build a couple projects in CMP territory, show them what we're capable of, go to Versant's management team, say, hey, look, this is our model. We can build solar plus storage all over your grid and improve its performance. You're not going to have these reliability issues. You're not going to have these technical concerns that you're currently having, and have that conversation kind of directly with them, as opposed to just on a one-off project basis like we're doing at CMP territory. So that kind of gets to like a bigger, where things go in part in the future here is we will be the driving voice behind energy policy in Maine in years to come. That, like, you heard it here first, that this is where this is all going, because the people need a voice at the table, and the policymakers are looking for a voice to help them figure out what to do. And the stakeholders that are around the table right now are just so fragmented. There isn't a clear voice of like what you should do instead. And so that's the role that we're going to play in this conversation moving forward.
Is it safe to say that we can put together some talking points so everybody in the room can talk to their legislator about preserving net energy billing for this particular model? I mean, I'm going to guess a lot having these conversations, and the more that we can kind of direct that. We're also having a panel at our convergence next weekend about the future of renewables in Maine, and we're trying to really come up with kind of saying yes, this is broken, but here's how we fix it, and we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. New model is going to help us really not and save people money, not cost people money. It's just a kind of movement they're throwing around here for people are getting solar, what people are paying. So we're going to save poor people a lot of money and not have anybody have to pay extra because we're going to provide this grid service. So that really clear to be able to feed those points so we can get all of our legislators on board here.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll just make one last point that on this is that last week I went to a meeting with a couple other solar companies to Senator Collins' office in Portland to make a pitch about protecting the tax credits. And it was not a pleasant experience. And there were 5 or 6 solar companies, us, Revision was there, and then a couple of regional developers, and then a national company. And so you imagine, I was probably wearing this, maybe a little bit nicer, but not much. You got some suits, you got some gelled hair, you've got a little too tight haircuts, and it didn't land, right? Like, you can't bring in these big companies and say like, oh, you need to protect our investments. We've invested $100 million. Meanwhile, the other side of the equation is that people are saying that that's causing their bills to go up, right? It's a very extractive model. Whether that's true or not is kind of not the point, but that's the narrative that is out there right now. And so I really came away from that meeting in particular by saying like, yeah, we need to build this policy discussion from the bottom up, so that when legislators, even in Augusta, are having these discussions, they're not learning about us together with everybody else in the halls of the Capitol. They know that when they hear from us in the halls of the Capitol, they're saying, oh yeah, 20 people were just telling me about this organization back home. And so that they're getting that message from both directions. And so the role of the member in Maine Community Power is a lot more important than the role of the customer under the normal community solar model. So we're definitely going to lean on you for that support. I could talk all day. There's a lot of questions. I'm sure we can come back to this a bit down the line, but I wanted to keep things moving here and bring up our treasurer, Mary Ann, for the finance report.
I can do it from right here, I think.
Yeah.
So we've been doing this now for a year. We incorporated back a year ago, March. And we started, I came on, had not been part of this group Yes, but except when we met back in the Norway library maybe 7 or 8 years ago, talking about being able to think about community power. And we have we have power on our farm, and the idea of being able to offer that option to lots of people is really good. And so I've been part of this process over the last year and really excited to see the money come from the Department of Energy, which was, and then we had to write a check for the materials. And we said writing a check for over $800,000 and sending it off in the mail is an experience that I probably will never have again. Doing that, yeah, never say never, I suppose. But we have brought in more money than our budget for 25 has been, called for. We have spent less than the budget requested. Information there. And so we are really facing this year with the capacity of seeing money in hand. And that's, for a lot of us, that's kind of a challenge sometimes. Farming is one of those things. So, so I think that's really an important piece that all of this is still like cash positive and able to say we're moving forward with ideas that are really exciting in terms of that. So the other piece is our where we're seeing our expenses for the first quarter. There's a lot more details that we could get for you, but we want to kind of see the big picture here. Is that our projects development is showing the 79.1, and the actual operations is 20, and that's probably a pretty heavy 20%. But we've done everything of all the setup, all the IT, everything that's making this organization possible to move forward. Has to kind of like it's that build that infrastructure startup. And that seemed like a big piece, and it has been, but it's been, I think, well documented, and we are doing a good job of seeing the pictures of the stuff. We've been impatient. It froze. We couldn't do these things over the winter, so being able to do the project, get started, is really good. So the other piece is on to the next, the operational expenses. As you can see, the big chunks, office expenses, and the 37%, that's payroll, and then the orange, the software. So those are big pieces that are now going to put us in good stead to go forward. So I would just make one response to the question that you had earlier about the question of making it a competition for other people wanting to do private solar. When in reality, we have a lot of people in the lower end of that bucket of people having to have in our membership, is that they don't live where you can do solar. They live in an apartment, they don't have the facilities to be able to put a project on a garage. So that I think that's the aspect of the cooperative that really enhances our perspective and our place in the business world, is that we are talking about people who need service, who need to be able to have better prices on electricity, and nobody else is looking.
I would just say about that population a little bit, and I can't validate it, but I have experienced it, that the current model on a commercial basis that has been in Maine for some time is a deficit that you will need to speak through, because they lapse if you don't design it right. The private companies do not have access to your CMP information directly, so you have to get it to them. You have to rebalance it every periodically, or you can lapse credits, or you will not make 15% off the difference, and so on and so forth. So when I talk to people in the rural community, because I've been through Power Market, I've been through Nautilus, just because I wanted to, but when I talk to people in the rural community, they kind of, well, I don't understand my CMP bill, and Jim, you want me to get involved with this other private company that I'll be getting another bill. So I'll get a CMP bill, and then I'll get another bill from Power Market. And my goodness, This month's a great big one. When you get, now I got two of them, and I do the math, I'm spending more for electricity this month than I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have an annual review of that and you balance it, cut it up. But I really think that 55% population is absolutely the most important component to serve. But I think they may be a little bit, my word will be, gunshot, meaning
Yeah.
sort of reinventing the conversation, because the conversation is not necessarily a trusted one, I think. So,
Yeah, exactly. And there are a million aspects to existing community solar that are problematic, but it could be, I think that the billing is probably the most important one. It's like, there's no way to guarantee the savings under the alternative models. And so we built a model that is guaranteed savings and doesn't require you to do any math. And so the point about the credit timing, I think, is it's huge, right? Like, even if you had extra resources, like, who really is ready to absorb a spring and summertime electricity bill for 5 times what it typically is, right? And so that alone, and to say nothing of the downside risk for when things don't work out, so on and so forth. But yeah, it's going to be up to us to make this pitch clearly, because all things equal, people are not going to know that we're really that different than any of the other companies that are out there. Yeah.
I didn't need the
That's
full
okay.
court.
Thanks
But I
for
think
Awesome. Thanks, Marianne.
questions.
All right, now part of this is a differentiator is our membership model and the systems that we have in place to make this easy for people. So Brian's going to walk us through some of that.
Hey everyone, I'm sure some of you have received emails from me before, maybe a phone call, but I'm Brian, I'm the operations manager, and quick update on our membership. As of this morning, one more check cleared, so we've got 76 paid up members of the cooperative, and we have 13 more folks who have begun the process, and we're just waiting on payment for their membership share. This is a 2-day-old graph, so it caps out at 74, I think, but you can see our increase in membership over time since we cashed the first check in October. A pretty steady growth, and I think there are lulls over the winter months there, but I think the most important point here is that this is all through word of mouth. I mean, Tyler has obviously been speaking pontificating about this model for a while now. CV has, Rachel at events, you all have been talking to your neighbors and for that. But this is, we have not really hit the ground running with like a massive membership acquisition strategy or effort yet. And we're at 74 members. For the first 2 projects, we're looking at probably roughly 100 members. And we've done that through word of mouth, and we've got some time before those projects go online. So we're feeling really confident about the direction of being able to acquire members to fill up our project capacity over time. Next slide. So we've been working with one of the chunks in the pie chart that Marianne was showing you was software costs. So part of that is we've been working with a software development firm called Passage Studios since the new year, roughly, to build out an entirely new membership portal. And so it's going to be an easy to use website where you sign up. We're going to launch this portal in June. I will create an account for you who have already become members of the cooperative, and you'll receive an email from me to log into your account for the first time with a preset set of credentials. You'll update some information, make sure we have the right addresses on file for you, that your name and contact information is all up to date and reflective of how you want to be communicated with. And then you'll connect your CMP account with your account with MCPC, and that allows us to retrieve your bill data every month. What that does for us is, when you sign up, we pull your whole billing history from CMP, and that helps us figure out how to most intelligently assign members to projects so that over the course of a year, we are producing the right amount of electricity for the members who have been assigned to a project so that we can, as accurately as possible, meet 100% of your energy needs all year and in perpetuity. Let's make sure that we can get you you don't have to pay multiple bills, and we can align it with your CMP billing cycle. You're not receiving bills at different times of the month, and we can make sure everything's all aligned for you. Then you'll set up your billing preferences. If you want to pay by check, set up recurring payments with a card or a bank account, and then you'll hang tight for a little bit until we can get you assigned to a project. As soon as we assign you to a project, we'll keep you informed every step of the way so that you know when to receive your first bill from us, when you can expect to see a change in your CMP billing cycle, because we can avoid the massive summer spikes of prepaying for credits with our cascading allocation model, but there will still be a month, unless your billing cycle happens to be aligned perfectly with our project cycles, where your billing cycle either shrinks or extends by a couple of days at the very beginning. And so we'll make sure that you know what to expect. That will be before you receive any discount through our community solar program, so your bill could increase or decrease marginally from CMP, but we'll make sure you're in the loop about that entire process. Next slide. Some things coming down the line after we launched the portal. We are building out a system for you to get memberships for folks in your community. The membership share we do offer for low to moderate income households, a pay in installments plan for your membership share of $100. You can pay in $10 up front and then monthly installments once you receive a discount on your electricity bill in the future. But also we just want to make sure that if you have a friend, family member, community member who's interested but maybe doesn't want to take that step, you can talk to them, and if they would get involved, if there were no membership share to purchase, you can purchase a membership share for someone in your community, and we'll then coordinate with them to set up an account for them. We are also launching a community partners program. So if there is a nonprofit organization in your community or one that we're already involved with, they can refer folks to us, and for every new member that signs up, we'll pay that organization $50. It helps us support all of our partners that are doing important work to organize, conserve, and strengthen the communities that we're serving. And at the same time, it grows our membership. So mutually beneficial relationship there. And then in the portal, for things that you'll actually see over time, we're going to build out functionality for you to kind of build an energy profile so that we can understand what your energy usage actually is. We see the raw numbers. We see how many kilowatt hours you use every month, and we can see your interval data for the past of hourly usage. But we want to understand, you know, your home and business energy, and as much as possible encourage beneficial electrification, because generate with our projects, the better. So we want to make sure that we're giving you the best discount possible. And then support for different CMP rate classes and complex cases. There are a million different competitive electric suppliers that folks have different contracts with. There are different CMP delivery rate classes. There are also other programs like the Low Income Assistance Program on energy bills. And one of the complexities there, and an issue that folks have with other community solar programs, is that shows up most often as just a cash balance on your electric utility account. But nowhere on your bill does it actually explain what that cash balance is. And if you've been assigned a percentage allocation from another community solar program, you can still just be billed for credits that you don't need. Because if you didn't have those credits, kilowatt hours would be showing up on your CMP bill, and the program would be covering your bill. Folks actually end up, even if they have a low income assistance program cash balance on their CMP account, they can still be paying for kilowatt hour credits from other community solar programs. And so one of the things that we're making sure we do before we have a single customer being served by our projects is that we have ways to detect that and make sure that we are never going to have anyone's bill be more than it would be if they weren't enrolled in our community solar program. And so because we are starting small and at this scale and working directly with our membership to build these programs out, we have the ability to build these relationships and make sure that we can do it right from the ground up. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Question, Brian.
Yep.
Does it make sense to have more than one person in a household be a member?
If you have a business, like if you and someone else in your household, like one of you managed your home utility accounts and one of you managed a small business, then yes. Otherwise, we would recommend that you just have a joint household membership.
Is that a different type of membership? A joint household membership?
No, I mean, the assumption is that most of the folks who sign up as residential CMP customers who become members of the cooperative, we assume just statistically that most people are members of a multi-person household. So that is kind of like the default assumption. There are a couple cases where members have signed up where they have like a home meter for their residence, and then they have a couple of SGS meters because they might have a residence that's like on a farm with other electricity needs. In that case, also because the discount rates are different for residential versus SGS meters, those people have set up one account under one person's name and one membership under a different person's name to manage their SGS meters. Yeah.
I have 3 meters. And, one of them is a small business. We live at the same location that small businesses. So would you recommend 2 memberships?
Only if you want that. So it's a bit of a preference. So we can also just manage multiple utility accounts under one membership, and we'll apply the right discount rate to the meters that based on their relevant delivery rate. So if you are the person who is managing it and there's not another member of your household who would want to be a member of the cooperative individually, then I would recommend you manage it all under one account. But if you have another member of your household who also wants to be like a voting member of the cooperative, and you have these 2 different sets of meters, one for a business, one for a residence, you'd be eligible to have multiple memberships. Okay. Yeah, it's a bit of a matter of preference. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Cool.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Yeah. All right, Matt, for some projects updates.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt Kennedy, head of project development for the cooperative, and thanks for being here. Our first annual meeting. So I just want to go over a few details of what makes an ideal project site. I think our member owners are the best people to broadcast this message and to understand this concept, so that when you're talking to folks, or maybe you're thinking about places that you visit, or maybe you could reach out to me if it hits all this criteria. But this is for one of our 28 kilowatt DC projects, 20 dual axis tractors. And so what we're really looking for is an existing field. And that's roughly 2 acres in size. That would be necessary to host the array, which occupies 1 acre, and then the easement area surrounding that array to prevent any shade of the panels. This footprint would need to be within 500 feet of a power line. Preferably single phase power line is kind of our bread and butter, as you've heard Tyler discussing our strategy there for the interconnections. And we would be running a conduit subsurface back to the road to interconnect. So 500 feet is roughly the distance you want to prevent any losses, to keep construction costs reasonable. The slope of that land would ideally be relatively flat, but again, this is Western Maine, where there's not too many areas that are relatively flat. So for sloped areas, we're looking at a maximum of 20% slope, and ideally it would be a southern facing slope to get as much sun exposure as possible. But we're not turning away sites that have up and downs. These trackers are able to be sited in a variety of different terrains, so that's another advantage to them. As Tyler mentioned, I'm a wetland scientist, so I think we're not interested in building in wet areas, which are relatively flat most of the time. So there's regulatory issues, there's also construction issues, but there's also ecological issues with developing sites in wetland streams, in floodplains. So we're up in the high and dry. And for another criteria would be that the subsurface, we would be able to get down to greater than 8 feet to install the foundations. As you saw in that one of the pictures of the deliveries of those concrete foundations at the done site, we're ready to dig some holes down and install these foundations. There's a couple of different mechanisms we can use if the bedrock is shallower, but it's an ideal situation. We can get that down to 8 feet. And we're looking for sites that are, a decent distance away from buildings, residences, again, also screened from public view. Just helps with permitting to keep these sites a little bit tucked back. But again, it's not the end of the world if there's public view. I personally think that they don't look too bad, but there's some folks who maybe don't agree with me. So yeah, that's an ideal 20 tractor site. So I got cars. So then I think Brian's going to touch on this piece.
Yeah. So as Matt and Tyler both mentioned, the single phase interconnection opportunity is quite a lot wider than the 3-phase. Okay, so here's an example of roughly the area in right now, and this is a map of the 3-phase power lines in roughly the Oxford Hills School District area. There's a decent amount of infrastructure in the bottom right corner, and then you get quite a lot more sparse further out. And further out is often also where we're seeing big fields that are perfect for building projects. I cannot overstate how transformative the work that Hussein has done for us in this process. You'll see on the next couple of slides. Hussein's on the call, and he has basically, he's waving there. He has taken a bunch of different publicly and semi-publicly available circuit maps and basically combined them into the most comprehensive CMP circuit map that is available. Not even really available because we've got it. And so if you hit the next slide, that's where we're looking for projects. This is just one tiny example, and this same proportionality applies roughly across the state. There are areas like Portland where it's not as dramatic, but there are still like dense towns around here, big open areas where we can build projects. And by unlocking the ability to look around along all of these power lines, which Hussein has made possible for us, we have expanded where we're able to look. I would say tenfold. I think it's much more than that. So that's where we're looking at projects along those blue single phase power lines. Next slide. So for MSAD 17, Hussein was able to build out this circuit map and then query every single parcel that is larger than 5 acres within 500 feet of a single phase power line, or within 500 feet of a road and more than 1,000 feet from a 3-phase power line, because we know that even the circuit map we have is not actually every single power line that exists in the CMP service area. This is obviously a massive opportunity. There are gaps because of the way the map is shown where you can't see the gaps in the map, but as you can see, it's the majority of the school district. There's a gap for Otisfield because we do not have parcel data for the town of Otisfield, which we'll figure out. So if you go to the next slide, 297 of these parcels, we've done a relatively deep look at the projects that we can build. So just in this one school district, that's almost 300 parcels of the ones that the tools that we have enabled us to find and decide like this is a great opportunity for us to look and try to contact a landowner. We know that this opportunity is greater because the GIS data that's available is extensive, but it is also not absolute. Like there are gaps in the system that we will find through things like referrals from your friends, neighbors, and community members. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is how we find our sites in the Oxford Hills School District. So first we identify a geographic area, like the school district, and we query all of the parcels that meet our very basic criteria that we can use at scale. We can go deeper and deeper and deeper, but in order to do these searches on a large data set, you have to keep it like relatively broad so that the resources we have can accomplish what we need to. Then we take that list of almost 5,000 parcels and we import it into a tool called PV Case Prospect, where we run a buildable area analysis. We set constraints for things like that I was talking about, like wetland, slope, tree cover, and we figure out of all of these parcels that are close enough to the right kind of power line and of the right size, how much of the area of those parcels is actually buildable without having to do a ton of site work. We don't want to cut down a bunch of trees to build these projects, and because we don't have to. There's a bunch of opportunities for us to do that without cutting down any trees. An example of how different this approach is than what anyone else is doing is that like the industry standard tools for conducting these buildable area analyses, whether that is PBK's Prospect, which is like a globally used tool in the solar and like infrastructure development world, or highly customized work that people pay the company S3 that makes ArcGIS to build out all of these programs that do these buildable area analyses. None of them are designed to look at this many parcels at once because there are not other solar developers really that are looking at this many parcels at once. So that is why what Hussein is doing is changing the game, because he's basically creating new systems that allow us to do this at scale efficiently so that we can use our time as effectively as possible. Then we take our buildable area analysis parcels, the ones that have greater than 2 acres of buildable area, and Matt takes a fine-tooth comb and looks at every single one of those parcels on a map individually to make sure that the data that we have is accurate and that this is someone that we should actually be contacting. Then we retrieve landowner information, which is both easy and hard to do in different ways. And then we contact the landowners. If you hit the next button, Tyler. So for MCPC 17, we've got 5,879 parcels that met our basic criteria. 676 had greater than 2 acres of buildable area. After a manual review, 434 of these were like 3-star parcels that met all of our in-depth criteria. We were able to retrieve landowner contact information that's for 297 parcels, which were owned by 247 different landowners, because a lot of people don't know in this area own a lot of properties. So there were roughly 50 duplicates in there. With those 247 landowners, Matt and Brian team take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And I can't reiterate enough how much Hussein has been an awesome person to have on the team. So we took those 247 landowners and we stuffed 247 envelopes, handwritten addresses. Maybe some of you got them, but yeah, we sent those out about a week and a half ago. And right now we are receiving some inbound calls from those folks across the Oxford Hills School District. And I've been visiting several properties across the region, meeting with landowners to discuss potential to build projects on their properties. Sure.
And does this still not include Otisfield?
This still does not include Otisfield, unfortunately. We do not have the property data available for our systems, but
I'm happy to try and help.
that'd be excellent. Yeah. There are still some properties in Otisfield that we are talking to folks on, so that is good news. But yeah, and as I mentioned, getting out there, meeting with landowners, you know, looking at the property, assessing where it might make sense, where they could be okay with a project being cited, and that meets our criteria. So and then we have some to track where we are at in terms of the development process, from the initial contact to the first site visit to the first instance of them getting a look at our lease. As someone from the audience online asked, we are leasing these properties. And we've fleshed out a good lease template with our first project host. So we're hoping to use that across the board. And yeah, I think we're also developing some systems to more effectively estimate the solar production on a kilowatt hour basis for these properties. And I am trained up as a FAA approved drone pilot to fly drone and get a real technical level understanding of the actual solar access and the shade on the site. So yeah, and then we execute the leases and begin permitting. That's kind of the initial process for getting us to those 6 projects built over the next few weeks to month. This is myself and Izzy will be joining us in a few weeks. I'm really excited about that. We'll be hitting the ground running on all of this. So. For the landowners who are hosting.
Yeah.
So when they agree to this, it's a long-term income source for most folks. I think our initial lease period is 20 years, and it'll give us the option to extend that to 40. So it's a 40-year income generator. And at year one, our lease rate is $4,000 per project. If they can host 2 projects, that would just double to $8,000. And, over the course of,
You don't have to tell me, I know.
you have a project site? Yeah, so it's a long-term income generator. I think a lot of folks see the value of utilizing areas of their property that may not be fully utilized currently. And again, one of the components of all of these projects that I maybe failed to mention, and I'll make very clear here, is that these are all dual-use projects, and we are very serious about them being agrivoltaic projects, which is the terminology for both having an energy production component and an agri. And that fleshes out at each site is different for each property, but that could look like, on one instance, it would be wildflowers, native plants that could provide pollinator habitat. Another instance could be if it's a hay field, that property owner could continue to hay that field for the entire duration of the lease. And then, or it could be you're raising sheep or cattle under these panels. And then in some instances where we're actually producing food crops, one of the ideas for the Dunn's property is to have, and what we're going to be planting very soon here are fruit trees that will, and nut trees. So, there's that potential as well. And I think a lot of folks, really get behind that message of utilizing the land, not only for energy production, but for agricultural purposes as well. So.
Just expand on that a tiny bit. These tractors actually, for certain types of production like vegetable production, could enhance the quality of that land to able to grow crops because they create a partial shade environment. They don't ever shade any of the land completely. And if you look at our project, I've always marveled at this over at the high school. When it gets a little drivey, beautiful grass under that tractor and everything else kind of burns off. So the people that are having like irrigation issues in the summer, growing crops under these tractors could be provide shade for the grower. It's kind of been a market grower. You're out in the sun all day. It'd be nice to be able to work around these tractors. So we're talking about fencing, which would also make a big difference. Fencing critters out, or in some cases, maybe fencing critters in. We could run chickens under these things. We could paddock it off. And chickens would love that shade and be able to keep them slowed down. And we would be planting cover crop for the chickens to eat. And there's just so many. I think I'll get a little jazzed about this, but this is my retirement plan is to help with this. Help the chickens. So they can be, live their best chicken life under these tractors.
I don't know how many residences there are in the Oxford Hills area. Sam could probably tell us, but at doing some quick math, if all 300 sites were developed at 50 households per site, that's 15,000 households for the Oxford Hills area. That would mean the Oxford Hills has the potential to become essentially energy independent for a fairly, that's 400 square miles. That's a pretty significant piece. That would be a lot of fun to make that happen.
Yeah, I can tell you there's about 12,500 residential addresses in the Oxford Hills School District. So pretty much tracks.
Wow. And that would keep a lot of money in the community.
Exactly.
To add on that, like one of the city 17, which took some time, is that you have a model that we can replicate. And what Hussein was able to do is then look, there are 16 circuits, not including any that exist only in Otis Field, that we grabbed parcels along. 16 circuits, 6,000 roughly parcels that met our basic criteria. There are actually 473, 476-ish circuits in the CMP system. We have parcel data for land that is served by 423 of those circuits. on which we found 144,000 parcels that very basically meet the initial criteria. We know that that's not really the number of totally viable sites, but we now have the data ready to go as we figure out what are the right circuits for us to be looking on, which is another exercise we're working on, where we are ready to go and just dive into each of these parcels and figure out where along each of these parcels the right, where along each of these circuits the parcels are at. You know, if we have a 7% return rate, or like a 0.7% return rate, you know, we are far past the realistic capacity of property development over the next many years. So there's a massive opportunity to develop these projects.
It's a very good start.
I just want to check a talking point for myself. Each 2-acre site generates about how many kilowatts a year, and that equals how many households. Let's say that the heat pumps continue to catch on, so annual residential use maybe 5,000 to 7,000 kilowatts a year. How many people does that create?
Yeah, it's 50 average Maine households per project.
50.
Yeah.
An average Maine household is 550 kilowatt hours per year consumption.
And the offset is 15% on the entire bill.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
150 kilowatt hours per
Per
month.
month, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I heard it. I heard it right. Even though I said it. Thanks.
This is all really interesting. The really exciting thing that we do,
We're ready. We got work to do. All right. So now everybody, thanks, Matt. Oh wait, we got this part. We already told you this, but basically, yes, we've got this. Reach out to 247 landowners, and we've got 11 projects under development right now. Of those 11 projects, 4 of them have been approved by CNP for interconnection. There's actually some others that we're still negotiating, but we have 4 that are kind of signed, sealed, and delivered. 2 that are permitted, and 2 that are under construction. So there's more to come beyond just the 2 that are under construction right now. All right, Scott.
Okay, so we sent out an email, and everybody got a link to the bylaws. And I'm sure everyone has read them thoroughly. Maybe you can get them to memory. And we just need to adopt them as a membership. And I'm going to put a motion forward that we adopt our bylaws that our board has worked so hard on. It's probably the biggest single thing that our board has done is get those bylaws shepherded through with the help of the Cooperative Development Institute and some lawyers. Second, we got a second. Okay. Any discussion about our bylaws? Any burning questions that I probably wouldn't be able to answer? Catherine's here to probably answer.
I thought they were well written.
So, ton of work on it, ton of thought and work. And we did what we really wanted, and then throw up to the lawyers. And the lawyers were like, "Oh, you can't really say that. You can say this." Back and forth, back and forth. I think I could read them again.
I just want to compliment you. I did read the entire document that you sent. It is not as dry as the Nautilus commercial contract.
Thank you.
Great job.
Appreciate that. I believe we have a quorum here. So if there are people that came together that have one membership, we can only have one vote. But we've done a bit of a head count. Who's online? We've got a quorum, which is 25% of our membership. We need just more than half of that. So we could thumbs up votes. Any other? Oh, who would vote to approve our membership? Our bylaws. Okay. Unanimous approval. Anybody that would not want to approve the bylaws?
And I see lots of hands behind you on the.
Okay.
Yeah, all those people.
So we have all those people so. Unanimous approval. 12 plus. How many do we have here?
The reactions online are fleeting, but it's 6.
All right, well, thank you. That was exciting. And now Tyler gets to do the main report.
One of the most exciting parts of our company is that the directors are elected by the membership. And so now we get to elect the directors. There are packets here for the candidates. 10 candidates. There are 10 roles. We've broken them up into 3 classes. There are people who will be elected for 3-year terms, 2-year terms, and 1-year terms. And the idea is, like in the Senate, we'll have these different classes. So we want to stagger the seats so that moving forward each year, about a third of the seats will be up for election. So if somebody gets elected this year for 1 year, then next year they could stand for the full 3-year term, and we'll get onto that cycle. There are 10 seats and there are 10 candidates. It would seem that everybody would automatically get elected. However, there is a rule that in order to be elected, you need to receive a majority of votes from the members at the meeting. And so if there's somebody you really didn't like, you could not vote for them. And if enough people didn't like them and didn't vote for them, then they wouldn't get elected, even if the seat was available. And so I'll hand out the ballots. If people who are from a multiple person household could just raise their hand so I know who to give the ballot to, that would be great. You can just check your boxes. I'll come back around in a minute and we can collect them. The people online can vote through a Google form, and then there's of course the corresponding information on the candidates. I'll hand these out and also just kind of open the floor. If there are candidates here who would like to say anything, we'll provide that opportunity as people are reading through and voting.
Can we have everybody who's here, who's on that list, stand up?
Yeah. Let's start there. Candidates can stand up.
Can you say who you are? I did have it. Mike Dunn. Brad Ross.
Sarah Burnham.
Ariana Haxton.
Stop alone.
And there are 2 in the chat as well. Gabriel and then David, if you want to unmute and share your name.
Good morning, I'm Gabriel Robertson.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Gibson.
And I know, and Matt Cannon is traveling today. Yeah, I see that he joined and dropped probably at different points. So.
And then there's a fan from Jenna as well.
Hey, I'm here too. Nice to meet you all.
All right, so I'll hand these out. If there are candidates who would like to say anything, then feel free to jump up and do so.
I did not read all the bylaws. Are there term limits?
There are. You can serve up to 10 consecutive years.
Wow, okay.
All right.
Just one thing. Next one's
Well, everybody wants to get certain big thing.
This is Do you need more?
I wanted to look at it.
Trying to bring this product to our clients. So,
That's how I thought it was. I forgot. I know it was a great. It was fun. It's like, well, don't let me get one. Something just to the wash.
it seems like a nice spread.
Turned out.
Yes. Yes.
Is there any Alex ready for I believe you can see those.
It'd be a good time to eat more muffins and bagels. Fresh bagels, just like
Tyler, are you chairing the meeting?
Not exactly.
Is Scott chairing the meeting?
I would say Scott, yeah.
Is there a secretary to the meeting?
Mike is the secretary.
So he's taking the minutes.
Well, we're gonna go through the recording.
Okay.
I'm only on 2 papers, but it's all first, so I can
All right. And that concludes the election of this year's board of directors. Thankfully, you made it easy and everybody won a majority of the votes. So congratulations to all 10 candidates. Our new board of directors. That's the end of the official business for today. So we can all hang out. We're ahead of schedule.
To adjourn.
And we'll take a motion to adjourn, but I think we're in no rush. So keep eating and chatting and we'll keep the conversation going.
I do have one question. No, it doesn't change anything. But in regard to land or prevention about planting trees, if there was a landowner who was interested in providing that they were open to a road to become visible, is part of the offer to them is that there will be planting, or are they responsible for that?
No, we would do the planting. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Let's keep going.
Does the landowner get any more offset on electricity because they have a posted site?
Not specifically, but they're eligible to become a member.
Membership restrictions.
Exactly.
I think we haven't talked about the different levels of discount.
Yeah. Why don't we adjourn the meeting and then we can keep talking. I'm not a member. Yeah, there we go. All right, Mary Ann in a second. All right, thanks. Thanks everybody for attending online.
Thanks, everyone. Great job.
Thank you.